Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Happy April. It is April 1st. And yes, it is April 1st, but let me just go ahead and get it out of the way that there will be no April Fool's jokes in this video. I'm personally not a fan of that kind of thing, so everything in this video is going to be completely honest. So let me get that out of the way first. Second of all, this is my March reading wrap-up, so I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in March. It was not as many as February. However, if you watched my February reading wrap-up, then you know, which I only did like last week. But anyway, if you watched it, then you know that there were a lot of hits, but also a lot of misses in February. And March is not going to be like that. Most of the March books that I read were really great. So it's going to be a lot better month, even though there are less reads. To get started... So I put this in the caption section of my February reading wrap-up video, but I feel like I have to say something in case you're wondering about the Barbie on my bookshelf and why she just randomly showed up. I don't know, maybe I'm just really self-conscious about it, but in case you're wondering, that is my niece's Barbie. In February, my 2 3-year-old nieces came to stay. And the younger 3-year-old, Katie, she left her Barbie here. So I found her 2 hours after they left to go home. I found her wrapped in some blankets, tucked into bed on the floor of my room. So I was like, oh no, Katie left her Barbie. So I put her here on my bookshelf because I was like, ooh, if I don't put her somewhere I'm going to see her every day, then I will forget to take her next time I go to see the kids. So she is here where I see her every day so that I can remember. And I'm going to see them this weekend because we're all going to go watch the eclipse together at my brother's house since he's in a good path for it. So if I forget to take this after putting it on my bookshelf where I see it every single day, I'm just going to be hopeless. But hopefully I remember to take it to her. Okay, that out of the way. Let's go ahead and get started with our video and talking about the books that I read in March. We have 8 books in March, so a good amount. I mean, if a month is 4 weeks, then that's about 2 books a week. It's not bad, but it's not as much as January or February. So the first book that I want to talk about is A Rebel Heart by Beth White. I read a series by Beth White last year that was my first Beth White series that I really liked. And I forget the name of the series, but it was one of them was called The Creole Princess, I think. And there were 3 books in the series. I might have only read 2 of the books, though. I don't know if I read the first one. They follow a family throughout generations, and I think the first one was a time period of history that I don't much care about, so I'm not sure I read it. But I should, because I liked that series, so I should go back and read it. But anyway, so I wanted to read more Beth White this year, and so I put Rebel Heart on my 24 in 24 list. And so I went ahead and read it, and then I also followed that up with the next 2 books in the series, which is A Reluctant Belle and A Reckless Love. Those 2 books aren't on my 24 and 24 list, I think because I had 23 books and I needed one more, so I put the first book in that series on there. But I went ahead and I read the entire series this month, and all 3 books in the series were 3 stars for me. I did enjoy the series, but there were a couple things. One is that I felt like we didn't necessarily get in the characters' heads enough and see their internal thoughts enough. And so some of the things that they said or did, because we didn't see their thought process behind it, were a little confusing. You know, they would say things in one chapter, and then in the next they'd say something else that I would feel would be incongruent. And if I had seen their thought processes and gotten how they got from point A to point B, it would probably make more sense. But they would, it would be one character would be I don't understand how he could do this. And then 2 chapters later, when they were referring that to that same situation, they would be yeah, I totally figured you would do this or something like that. And I'm like 2 chapters ago, you didn't understand their actions, and now you totally understand their actions. How did we get from point A to point B? And so there was that. I just felt like there was some incongruencies there, like with what they were saying throughout the progress of the book, that I did not see how they got there. And I felt like if we would have gotten a little more of their thought process and internal dialogue, we could have seen that. But in the first Beth White series that I read last year, I did not have this problem. I felt like everything was pretty clear, so I don't know if it's just this series or what. The other thing that kind of made this series get a little bit of lower stars for me is that it's a bit graphic in the fact that the first book in the series, so each of the books follows a sister, and it takes place after the Civil War, and they're these three sisters that own a plantation in Mississippi, and they basically, because their father was a Confederate officer, they've basically lost all their money after the Civil War, as many Southern gentry did, and they're trying to save their plantation, so they end up partnering with an investor to turn their plantation into a luxury hotel. So they're going through that throughout the series. But the mother, at the very beginning of the novel is like a flashback to the Civil War and the night that their mother died, and she was attacked by some rogue army soldiers. So unfortunately, there is some descriptions of that, which can be a bit of a trigger warning for people. I personally don't like seeing that in books. So there was that. There was also some graphic violence. The first book in the series really focuses on the oldest daughter and her trauma from her mother's death and her work as she tries to save her plantation as the oldest and the one responsible. And the second, and that book has a villain that's different from the second two books. The second two books focus more on the activities of the Ku Klux Klan right after the Civil War and its formation and how it built up in the South and Mississippi. And so the male heroes of the second two books are investigating and fighting against the Ku Klux Klan. So there's quite a bit of graphic violence with those two books, because if you know anything about the KKK throughout history, they were very brutal in their attacks, not only to blacks, which the KKK was very racist, so they were not only brutal in their attacks to them, but they're also to any white sympathizers. They were very brutal with that too. And so there are some descriptions of their attacks, and their murders that they did, that I was like, oh, that's a little too much blood for me. Just because I don't I'm okay with violence in the sense of if I'm reading a war novel or something like this where there are attacks, but I prefer to keep most of the graphicness of that violence off the page. And so there were a few scenes in here that I was like, oh, I don't want to picture that dead body in my mind the way you described it. So that was a little much for me. So that definitely knocked off a few stars for me, and I will warn you guys of that in advance. There are a little bit of graphic attacks in here. And then the third thing that knocked off stars for me was that the conclusion of the third novel was a little hazy to me. The couple got together, but I felt like the conclusion of the KKK investigation was a little hazy. Because, throughout the novels, they kind of piece together that there's, one ringleader in the area that they're investigating. Obviously, throughout the KKK, there was a lot of ringleaders. But in the specific area of Mississippi where they're investigating and the specific murder cases they're investigating, there's, one ringleader that they're trying to get. And I don't know if they actually get him. I feel like they were able to identify him in the end, but it doesn't say anything about a trial or an arrest. And so I'm like, was he brought to justice? I don't know. That part was a little unclear to me. So there was that. But yeah, the main part that made it 3 stars and not more was just that it was a little graphic in some spots, for my personal opinion. So that was I think the name of the series is the Daughtry House series or something, because that's the name of their their hotel. It might not be. I don't know. Anyway, so the next couple books I read. So I started rereading the Anne of Green Gables series in March. It's one of my favorite series. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but the Anne of Green Gables books was the books that really got me into reading. I was very outdoorsy as a kid. Like, I would get home from school and go straight outside and play with the kids in my neighborhood. We played baseball, we played tag, we rollerbladed. You know, we were very active. And so I was a very active kid, and I didn't play inside all that much. But I loved, like, story time with my mom. Every night, like, when I was a kid, every night when my mom tucked me into bed, she would read a chapter from a book to me. So we would pick a book that we'd go through, and we'd read one chapter every night. And I always loved that. But I never really read much on my own because I was always outside playing and being active. And so when I was about 12, my mom gave me Anne of Green Gables and was like, look, you need to read this. Like, just don't argue with me. Just sit down and read it. And I read it, and I absolutely fell in love. I never went back. I started just devouring books after that. Like, after the Anne of Green Gables series, which I think I read all 8 books in about 3 months. Which, now looking back on it, like, that's nothing. I mean, like, that's a long time for 8 books. But I was just getting into reading then. So, I thought it was fast to read 8 books in 3 months. Now looking back, I'm like, I could have read those 8 books in less than 1 month, but okay. Anyway, so after that, it was always, like, trips to the library and always looking through books to pick out what to read, and I fell in love with reading after that. I also started playing outside a lot less, which... good for reading, bad for less activity. But yeah, just a part of growing up, I guess. Anyway, so I read this month, I read the first 3 books in the series as rereads. So I read Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea, and Anne of the Island in March, which all 3 of them are 5 stars for me, top notch. This month coming in April, I'm moving on with Anne's House of Dreams. I'm skipping Anne of Windy Poplars because I just don't like Anne of Windy Poplars that much. And it's almost like sacrilegious for me to say I don't like an Anne book because they're amazing. And literally all other 7 books are 5 stars for me. I just don't like Anne of Windy Poplars. I didn't like it as a kid, and I tried rereading it as an adult, and I still didn't like that much. So yeah, I'm just skipping Anne of Windy Poplars on this read through this time around. So anyway, I read those 3 books, and they're all 5 stars because I love Anne. And exciting news, in June, I am going to Prince Edward Island for a week, so I'm going to visit Green Gables, and I'm actually going to see Anne of Green Gables, the music town in Charlottetown while I'm there. I've already bought my tickets to go see it, and I'm going to go to Green Gables, and I'm going to go to Avonlea, and I'm going to go to the Anne of Green Gables store, and yes, I am very excited for that. I told my mom, because I'm traveling with my parents and 2 of our friends. We're going on like a 5-people group, and I told my mom, I was like, you know how like sometimes like these like shopkeepers and sellers, they kind of see people come in and they know like, oh, I'm just gonna make like a bunch of money off this person. I was like, that's gonna be me. All those Anne of Green Gables souvenir seller people, they're just gonna see me coming, you know, like I'm gonna spend way too much money on Anne of Green Gables themed souvenirs. I just know it. Anyway, so yes, that's really exciting news, and there will be more Anne of Green Gables books mentioned in my April video because I'm going to keep going in this series, but I read these 3 in March, the first 3 books in the series, and y'all, if you haven't read them, please do. They're adorable. The first book, Anne of Green Gables, starts when Anne is, I believe, 11. She is an orphan who gets sent to live with an elder, middle-aged, pushing older siblings. Neither of them ever married, and they're looking for some extra help on the farm, so they decide to adopt a little boy, but they get a girl instead, and that is Anne. And she is very precocious, like she's full of imagination. The descriptions, not only of her imagination, but also of the setting in this book are just beautiful. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited to visit Prince Edward Island, not just for the Anne stuff, but for the scenery itself, because Ellen Montgomery made it sound absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, there's a lot of like imagination-filled hijinks in this book, and it's adorable. Then you have Anne of Avonlea, in which Anne is a teenager. She's 16 or 17. I think, oh yeah, the back of the book says she's 16 when this book starts. She has gotten her teaching certificate, and it goes over her first couple years of teaching, because this is historical, so it's back when, people grew up at a younger age. And so she is teaching, and it goes over her first couple years as she teaches, and as she, I think they take in the twins in this book. Yeah. So her and her adoptive family, they take in 2 6-year-old twins, and so she's kind of like, she's gone from the precocious child herself to trying to raise precocious children and teach them in the classroom. And so, but she's 16, so she's still very much a child herself, but she's kind of learning to be an adult, so that's great. And then we have Anne of the Island, in which Anne heads off to a 4-year college. So she's saved up some money while she's teaching, and she heads off to some 4-year college, and she is courting and studying and learning how to grow up even more than she has in the past. So there's those. Yes, okay. All 3 of those are 5 stars. So then, the next one is a new read for me, A Noble Scheme by Roseanna M. White. You guys know that Roseanna M. White is one of my favorite contemporary authors. This is the second book in the Imposter series. It's a second chance romance with our main characters, Gemma and Graham. They are side characters in the first novel, and we are told in the first novel that they've broken up, and that Gemma doesn't want him around, doesn't want to speak to him, but we're not shown why. In the first novel, we do find out in this novel, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I will warn you that this novel deals heavily with grief, and it also deals with forgiveness and healing. So without spoiling anything, I will say that there was an accident, and Gemma is very angry at Graham over the accident, and that is what split them up in the first place. And so their second chance romance has a lot to do with healing from grief and coming back together. Yeah. I gave it 4 stars. It was really good. This is because it focuses on grief, it's a lot more focused on the mental process, the healing process, than it is on like the storyline, I think. The Imposters series follows a group of private investigators called the Imposters, who investigate cases in the high society. So this one focuses on a kidnapping scheme. And Gemma and Graham are kind of pushed together to handle that case together. And because the novel was so focused on their grief and their healing and their learning to forgive each other, I felt like some of the main kidnapping plotline got not necessarily overshadowed, but I guess interrupted is the right word. Because for example, there was one spot in particular where they're looking for the kidnapped boys, and I feel like they're sneaking down the hall, and she hears a noise, and she's like, oh, we're getting close to the boys, but someone might be coming. But then that noise triggers something in her grief, so we go on 3 paragraphs of her processing this grief, which is, it's good because the novel is about grief, but it's 3 paragraphs where I'm like, but wait, what was the noise? Is a bad guy coming? Is the noise the boys they're looking for? What was the noise? And it's not till 3 paragraphs later that we're back in the present, and she's, creeping further down the hall. And so there were a few instances like that in the book where it's we went a little, because we were diving into that grief, I was like, wait a second, what's happening in the actual suspenseful story right now? Yeah. So, but I did give it 4 stars. It was really good, but I do have to warn you that it deals heavily in grief. So if that's a trigger for you, you should be warned of that. Okay, and the last book we're going to talk about is Karen Witemeyer's If the Boot Fits. This is the second book in her Texas fairy tale series. This is a gender bend on the Cinderella story, so it's a Cinderfella. I gave it 4 stars. It was really good. So there's this guy, and his name is Asher, and he kind of sneaks into a really rich cattleman's house one night to look for evidence of, because his mother was renting from them and she got evicted. Oh, I guess technically she's his stepmother, and she got evicted, and so he was looking for evidence of like wrongdoing because he didn't think that she should be evicted. And so he's looking through this guy's office for evidence when he hears people coming, and so he flees. But a lot of things happen during his fleeing, and he ends up losing his boot and leaving it behind. And the cattleman's daughter finds the boot, and so she's like, I'm going to find this guy with this boot. And so she's like looking for him. Meanwhile, the same 2 characters, her name is Samantha. So Samantha and Asher kind of meet under different circumstances. So he doesn't know that she's looking for him. She doesn't know he's the one they're looking for, but they're pushed together to work together for different things, for something else. And so they're getting to know each other, like different from her search for him. So there's that going on. There's also some like mysterious things going on with her. Like she keeps having, at first it's just like accidents, but then it's just getting like more deliberate to harm her, and so she can't figure out who wants to harm her, and so that's going on as well. And yeah, I will say that like it didn't take me very long to figure out who the bad guy was. Like it's supposed to be pretty, we don't officially find out till towards the climax of the novel, but I think it was like, between the second and third incident, I was like, okay, I know who it is. So yeah, there was that. But that's pretty normal for me. I usually figure it out pretty early, so I'm not mad at it. But yeah, I gave it 4 stars because it's really, really good. And the third book in the series that's going to be coming out, I think, in the fall, is A Tale of Red Riding Hood. I'm super excited for that one because the first book was Snow White and this one's Cinderella, and I feel like those kind of fairy tale retellings are done a lot. But I'm really excited to figure out how she does Red Riding Hood, especially because like she doesn't do any like magic or fantasy in these books. These are all historical Texas set novels, so she takes the fairy tale and she does it in a way that, you know, is pretty realistic and could actually happen in history. So it makes me curious how she's going to reinvent Red Riding Hood for like a prairie Texas story. I'm really excited for that one. Okay, so that completes my March reading wrap up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. We'll have some more videos in April, so look for those in the future. Bye.